On the aftermath of what was a monumental day in Philadelphia Union history, we all forget we still got a match to talk about. Welcome, everyone, to today's edition of PHLY Union Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, JP Zapata, joined as always with the lovely Renee Washington, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, like we talked about, we have an actual match to talk about this upcoming Saturday as the U will be welcoming in an old foe down in Florida in Orlando City. And to join us here today, the man who calls the matches, from the radio broadcast down in Orlando City's radio broadcaster, Evan Weston, joins us here today. Evan, welcome on in. How are we feeling today?
Feeling good. Thanks for having me. Excited for the game. A big game for both teams, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
It definitely will be. And it's a good matchup because I think both of these teams need a get-right game, and hopefully this weekend can be that for one of them. Whoever is able to possibly walk away with 3 points, or it could be a draw. Who knows? Not to jump ahead and get into predictions because we'll get to score predictions at the end. But I know, Evan, first things first, Orlando City right now has a lot going on. What a chaotic game against Cincinnati. Red cards, injuries, a lot happened, and a lot happened even in the opening seconds. What is the state of Orlando right now coming into Saturday's match off of a wild, it hasn't been a good start results-wise, but to add insult to injury, it was just a very chaotic game.
You've got two teams here who are dropping home games, right? And that's the way to miss the playoffs in MLS. And Orlando's already lost 3 home games this year, and just had 2 that they threw away 2 weeks ago. One against Toronto that they got a goal early, they led the whole game and conceded too late to lose to a team that frankly they have more talent than. And then last week, like you said, you don't want to concede in 17 seconds. It's not ideal. It's not how you want to start a game. You certainly don't want to compound that with a red card in the 23rd minute, but that's what they did. And funny enough, I said this on Twitter after the match. I actually thought that after Rodrigo Schlegel got sent off, they played as well as I've seen them play all season. Cincinnati, I was pretty unimpressed with. I thought they were kind of negative in the way they approached it, and Orlando was taking it to them. But they only had 10 guys, and it's hard to score a goal when you have 10 guys, and they just weren't able to get one over the line. They actually did score and had it ruled out for offside, and then got close a couple more times, but did not actually get one over the line. And so the team that finished second in all of MLS last year is now second from the bottom in the Eastern Conference. And this is a team that also lost both of its starting fullbacks to injury in that game. Dagerdan Torhalsen, as of today, Thursday, when we record this, is in concussion protocol. They don't know if he'll be cleared in time. And Rafa Santos, the left back, is questionable for the game on Saturday, but did not train today. So we'll see if he's able to make it. But overall, it's going to be a tough game in Philadelphia. There's a couple of different things plaguing the team right now. I'd say the 2 biggest ones are kind of a questionable fit between their attacking pieces. Duncan McGuire is still here. He wasn't supposed to be. He actually had his press conference with Blackburn Rovers in England. They took all the pictures and he was signed. And it turns out the report from The Athletic was that Blackburn hit the save button instead of the submit button on the transfer paperwork and missed the deadline. And so after appeal, which was denied because these deadlines are important, Duncan McGuire had to come back for at least the next 6 months and has been a model citizen. The problem is Orlando City completed a deal for a designated player forward, Luis Muriel, to replace Duncan McGuire, and now they're both on the roster. And Luis Muriel has had a rough start to life down here. He doesn't seem to be on the same page with his teammates. He plays, if you've watched Cucho Hernandez with Columbus, that's the idea. That's how he wants to play, kind of off the striker, in and around the box, creating as much as scoring. And Orlando doesn't play with that kind of player. So it's been an adaptation process for him. Meanwhile, Duncan McGuire keeps scoring goals, so he needs to be in the starting lineup. And there's no real number 10 behind them. They've tried 4 or 5 different players in that spot. None have really stuck. I think Martin Ojeda has looked the best, but he hasn't really gotten a great run. They were winning when they took him off at the hour mark and immediately got worse. Then he was the sacrifice for the red card last week, so we didn't really get to see it. So that's one is long story short, it have not worked. And then at the back end, they've just conceded cheap goals. Way too many cheap goals. They'll be the first to tell you. This is one of the best defensive teams in MLS for the last 4 years. Oscar Pareja is known as a coach that prioritizes defensive organization. This team is so hard to break down, and this year it's been so easy for teams to carve them up. The goalkeeper Pedro Galeses had a really rough start to the season. He's still trying to find his way back to very similar actually to what's happened with Philadelphia with Andre Blake, where it just seems like an all-world goalkeeper is in a rough patch that they can't get out of. And so, between the sort of weak-kneed defense and the questionable fit with the offense, everything's a little messed up right now for Orlando City. They have the talent to fix it. There's just a question of how they're going to go about doing that.
Wow, that's incredible. So, Renee will tell you, when we did our predictions for the Eastern and the Western Conference heading into the season, I was extremely high on Orlando. You touched upon a couple of the reasons, but just with that attack, you guys had so much depth. Even the starting was great. And Duncan McGuire, I was looking for his revenge tour. He had to been upset with how that all transpired with Blackburn, and so I really was high on them. Look, you kind of touched upon some of the issues of the attack, but I just think it is wild with all the names that you mentioned. Let's also throw in Facundo Torres in there as well. 11 goals. I mean, it's May now, and 11 goals. That's what's astonishing to me. Is it really just the fit with these players? Is it Pareja's tactics? What is it exactly? Because 11 goals, that's pretty low for these guys.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the lack of a true number 10. This team had Mauricio Pereira last year. He wasn't, in terms of a box score stats guy at this point in his career, gonna throw up huge numbers, but he'd reliably get you 10 or 11 assists. He wasn't a goal threat, which was what some fans had an issue with him, but he was the captain, spiritual leader of the team, and he kept it all organized. He was like that pass first point guard, right, who was just there to keep everything together and facilitate, and he's not out there hunting for glory, and the team kind of clocked around him, and that allowed guys like Ivan Angulo and Facundo Torres, who you mentioned. There's another guy who's had a rough start to the year, and especially Duncan McGuire, and even those fullbacks, Rafa Santos and Dagerdan Torhalson, who are two of the better attacking fullbacks that you have in the league. They all were able to shine based off of that. Pereira's gone. They mutually terminated his contract. He wanted to go back home to Uruguay to reconnect with his family. He's down there. Orlando City, instead of buying a DP number 10 to try and take the team to the next level, made the decision that they were going to use that spot on the number 9 where Duncan McGuire was going to vacate and instead bring in Nico Lodero to play the 10 on a TAM contract. Now, Lodero is one of the best number 10s in the history of the league. He's now 35 years old. He has been terrific as a super sub. In fact, if you go back and watch our game against DC United about a month ago, he came off the bench and had 2 assists in a comeback win, which was probably their best win of the year, winning at DC United back in April. And at the time, we thought that was going to get them going. It turned out not to be the case. But he hasn't really been able to go the full 90 minutes effectively. And then you've had other guys play that role. Muriel, who's really a striker, Torres, who's really a winger, and now Ojeda getting another crack in there, who's also really a winger, but is at least someone who is very progressive. They're going to try him there, I think. But that lack of a nucleus, and the players have said this in interviews as well, you need that guy to keep it all organized. It's like, if I continue the basketball analogy, if you watch the Phoenix Suns this year, they had Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal and Devin Booker, but they didn't have a point guard. And the whole thing just didn't really work. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're seeing with Orlando City. So whether it's making a drastic change over the summer or Martin Ojeda just working out there and getting a good run of games and that being the thing, but they need something in the middle to kind of come together and give them more chance creation, because right now it's a lot of sizzle without a lot of steak, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it is a shame because we definitely did our previews and had really high expectations, especially when Duncan McGuire was staying with Orlando City.
Yeah, so did we.
Watch out. Everybody did. I think this is probably one of the biggest surprises at the start of the MLS season. And I think even the Union are in a similar spot where both teams are underperforming right now. And it just seems like there's more behind the scenes going on that you really understand. And it's not even just the talent. It's not a talent thing. Both teams have the talent. They're not getting the results. 2 wins for Orlando, 3 wins for the Union. Both teams, as you mentioned, dropping home games. Orlando having pretty close losses, aside from that 5-0 loss to Inter Miami that I hate to even bring up. Every game has been close. It's been tight. It's been down the wire. And even as you mentioned, last week, down a goal, down a player, still fighting. So the talent is there. And I'm interested about this matchup for this exact reason. 2 teams that talent is not really reflected in their standings, in their results, and how they've been, coming out each day. And for whatever reason, they haven't been able to put together a full 90 minutes. We've talked about that with the Philadelphia Union. It's been, you're giving up a goal, and lately 2 goals or 3 goals in the first half, and you're playing catch up. And now all of a sudden, in the last 45 minutes, you look like all-stars, and you can come out against Seattle or Atlanta or whoever and play incredible soccer. And you wonder, what would this team be like if they could put that together for the full 90? So going into this matchup with all these things going on, of course, the Union did have a nice bright spot with this announcement of Kevin Sullivan, which has been exciting for the Union, exciting for the area in general, for such a monumental roster move like this in the 14-year-old generational talent. Orlando versus the Union. What is it that you think tactically is going to be what Union fans especially can expect from how Orlando's going to line up? Because as you mentioned, it seems like they're still in the midst of figuring a lot of stuff out. The Union are too, but it's more injury that are causing it. But their starting 11 is pretty solid. You kind of know what you're going to get from the Union and how they're going to roll out. Their back four, even with Andre Blake hurt, it's going to be Oliver Zemla in net. You'll have 2 of the 3 combinations of center backs between Damian Lowe, Jack Elliott, Jacob Glesnes. 2 of those 3 should be out there. Nate Harrell and Kai Wagner on the outside. The midfield is going to be some sort of a 4-4-2, whether it's a diamond or a flat 4. But the usual starting 13 that they kind of rotate, you have an idea of. Tactically for Orlando, though, what can you expect to see this weekend in terms of how they're going to play, their style of play, and also even how they're going to look to line up?
Yeah, it's interesting with both starting fullbacks potentially missing the game. You wonder how that's going to look. It's funny, too, Orlando, when they got sent off. So for background, they play a 4-2-3-1 pretty much always. It's not strictly rigid that way. They'll tend to have the left back kind of stay back in possession. The right back will go forward and get into the attack. Sometimes the right back will invert and the right winger will go wide. The left winger tends to be a little bit more direct. The right winger tends to come inside. That's usually Facundo Torres or Martin Ojeda, kind of a left-footed player that can cut inside. Ojeda's seen more time in the last couple of matches at the 10. So you'd have that player in there as well. But with Santos and Torhaldsen out, I'm not entirely sure if they are both out, how this would work. And when Schlegel got sent off last week, Orlando City went to a back 5 and actually looked pretty good. They had Wilder Cartagena, who's a midfielder, play center back for most of the game. They have played with 3 at the back before, typically when they're leading games and want to see out a result. It'd be pretty surprising if they went that far with the starting lineup on Saturday, but it's a club that they have in their back pocket. But 4-2-3-1, generally what you can expect, building with 3, double pivot in midfield, and trying to build up with that left winger. And the game model has not really changed all that much. They really have played the same way for 5 years under Oscar Pareja. And I wonder if that has something to do with why they are struggling this year, if teams have finally looked at them and said, well, they've been ripping people apart in transition. Let's just give them the ball and make them break us down. And Orlando hasn't been able to do that, and their transition defense hasn't been good enough. So that's not a great recipe against the Union, is it? It's a team that doesn't want the ball. They want you to come after them and hit you on the break. And Mikel Uro, with all that speed, I would imagine he will start if Carranza is suspended, which is a nice break for Orlando that he won't be in there. Maybe him and Quinn Sullivan and Gazdag would be that kind of front 3, and they're going to have to be very careful in transition. As far as Philly's defense, Maguire is a handful. He is a real problem, and they've scored 11 goals. He's got 4 of them with pretty limited service. He seems to have actually, if you watch his build-up, the way he holds up the ball, very intelligent runs. I think he's gotten better, even though he may end up with fewer goals this year. And that's not even a certainty at this point. It's still very early. But I think he's gotten better. I think he's going to have a really long, fruitful European career. He has been a model citizen. Like you mentioned, JP, he could have easily been sulking and said, I'm not going to play. I'm going to sit out until the summer and get my move. Nope. He came back, put his head down, and has been exemplary. So you got to reference him at all times, and then you got to stop the ball from getting to him. That has been what teams have thrived on. But we'll see what sort of wrinkles Orlando can throw at Philadelphia in possession to try and break them down a little bit. Orlando's had success against Philly in recent years. Knocked them out in the Open Cup 2 years ago when we went on and won the whole thing. Won in Philadelphia last year. I believe we were the team that broke that really long streak during the international break when all the internationals were gone. And we said, nope, we don't care, and scored twice in the first 10 minutes. So, yeah, and that's interesting too. You mentioned how Philly gives up goals early. Orlando leads the league in goals allowed in the first 15 minutes. They've allowed 6 of them in 10 games. Last year in 34 games, you know how many they gave up? 0. None. So it has been a complete 180 on that end. If one team can get ahead early, the beginning of the game, I think you're going to have 2 emotional teams trying to prove themselves, and that can lead to chaos. So don't be late to kickoff, I guess would be my my recommendation.
With 2 teams that give up goals in the first 15, 20 minutes pretty frequently, who knows how the start of this game is going to go?
Yeah, I mean, 17 seconds last week. And Orlando earlier this year scored against Minnesota in 13 seconds. So
wow,
it can happen. It can happen.
Absolutely. It's interesting you bring up Duncan because, like, on the wake of, Kevin Sullivan signing a monumental deal at 14 years old, here's Duncan McGuire, who was a draft pick. Yes, there's still draft picks that come into the league, guys. And here he is, could be playing in Europe right now, but obviously, got to hit submit, guys. And he's still here. He's being, like you said, a model citizen. He's having a fantastic season. And so it goes to show, like, that avenue is still there. It's really about your mental build and how you kind of or how you perceive your day-to-day. So it's really cool to see Duncan thriving even after everything that's going on. But I want to look at his manager real quick, Evan, because every time I interact with Orlando fans or pundits and whatnot, there's a little bit of like Oscar Pareja fatigue. And like I know this happened with Dallas and towards the end of that tenure, but like, is Orlando running into that Oscar Pareja fatigue right now?
I don't think so. I think it's more of a roster fit thing than a coaching thing. Would you maybe want to see him tweak the game model at this point? Possibly. If we're gotten to that point, let's not forget how easy it is to make the playoffs in MLS. They're still only 5 points out of a playoff spot with 24 games to go. Nothing has been written yet. It is incredibly easy to get in. So I don't think that, it's easy to live by results and be doom and gloom. I don't think we need to be quite there yet. And frankly, they had 63 points last year. From June 1st to the end of the year, they were by far the best team in MLS. They were, I think, 10 points better than FC Cincinnati from June 1 to the end of the year, somewhere around there. So, they looked like an MLS Cup favorite last year. They just ran into the Columbus buzzsaw and had a Rodrigo Schlegel red card in the playoff game, and still had ample opportunity to win that game and just came up short. That's the nature of the beast. But I think we've seen this team be too good too recently to give up on them, I think. And look how easy it is to be bad and then great. Look at Inter Miami as an outlier example, but it doesn't really take that much. Look at FC Cincinnati. They were the worst team in MLS 3 years in a row, the worst team in MLS history, their first 3 years. 2 years later, they won the Supporters' Shield. It is not that hard to turn it around. There's so much parity. And I think if you make the decision to move on from an Oscar Pareja, you better have a great replacement lined up, because the floor with Oscar is so high, and they're not going to finish in 14th place. That would be stunning. They will turn it around and at least be in the playoff mix by the end of the year, because that's what he does. They've never missed the playoffs with him as the manager. They've had 2 great teams in 4 years, and one of the not great teams won a trophy. So I think it is far too early. He just got a new deal. Every time we want to sack the manager when you lose a couple games in a row. I think that soccer could learn from American sports a little bit and have a little bit more patience and a little bit more faith in the process.
Jose Mourinho's a free agent, Evan. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that's realistic. He doesn't strike me as the Disney type. Just
true.
my 2 cents.
I can totally see the Magical Kingdom.
Very true. It is interesting because both teams do have another similarity in that there's been a lot of consistency in how they play tactically, which has made them a little bit predictable. And one of the changes that you talk about, like in Inter Miami, is it's a completely different group. Obviously, bringing in someone like Messi and you have Busquets and Suarez obviously helps a lot too. But overall, they've changed their model. They've changed how they line up, how they play. And both Orlando City and the Union have been pretty much the same, kind of running it back year after year. You look at last year's playoff game, that was one of my favorite games to watch. I didn't have a horse in the race, so I didn't care the outcome of Columbus Orlando. It was everything. This is exactly what the league is about. It's down to the wire. Any given day, any team can win. And also, as you mentioned, Evan, even at 14th right now in standings, Orlando can definitely climb the table, hopefully not starting this weekend. So that being said, without Julian Carranza, it's going to be a difficult game offensively for the Union. They're going to rely heavily on Daniel Gazdag, Quinn Sullivan, Jack McGlynn, who's scored in back-to-back games now. Hopefully, as you mentioned, Ua, he hasn't been playing that great, to be honest. Hopefully, this is a game that he's going to be called upon and step up in that absence of Julian Carranza and be able to, whether he gets a start or he's off the bench, be able to help contribute and get them on the scoreboard in some way. So with that being said, I am curious, though, because as we did mention, who knows where this game can go? We could have a 2-2 game in the first 15 minutes. By the way, these teams give up goals early. It can be a scoreless, back and forth, down to the wire game. It could be very one-sided, where one team finally gets clicking and offensively is just, able to rattle off goals. So what is your prediction for this matchup this weekend? How do you see this one finishing in terms of a final score?
Yeah, it's hard to predict, right? It's a game that I think you're going to have a lot of emotions. Two teams that are pretty desperate to break out of a funk. Orlando's schedule going forward is brutal. They've got Miami at home on Wednesday. And listen, it's hard for us because there's the Messi World Tour, right, where he goes around the country and sells out stadiums. Nobody in Orlando wants to see him do anything good. He will get booed louder on Wednesday night than he ever has in his time in the U.S. Orlando will get under his skin. But that game in March was when they have all of them, there's only so much you can do. And then they go to San Jose 72 hours later, traveling from Florida to Northern California. San Jose is not having a great season, but that is like a back-to-back road game in basketball or something like that, or the Thursday night road game in the NFL. It is very, very hard to win those. And then they got Columbus the week after that. So this is one that I think they're going to feel a lot of pressure to have. Will we see some sort of wrinkle from Oscar Pareja? They don't have their fullbacks. I don't know. I'll conservatively project 1-1, but these games are usually wacky between these two teams. I think some sort of chaos will occur to get us there.
That would only be Philly and Orlando. It always feels like that. But one point I want to bring up here is that, like, the past couple matches, and Renee, you're right, like, they need to get back into their winning form before that bye week. But I think more importantly, I want to keep it basic here, right? Like, something as simple as playing good team defense. Like, if you look at the past 3 matches, you haven't really seen that consistent team defense, and that's why they've been some of the best defenses over the past couple of years. Glesnes, you talk about containing Duncan McGuire. We need Glesnes kind of step up. I mean, we can't have that same. Was it Muriel got that goal for DC? Like that goal, that second goal that he had can't happen. Glesnes needs to put his feet in there. So, in overall, especially with Zemla back there, I want to see better team defense, and the attack will come even without Carranza. If you play strong style defense, we know how we can attack on that counterattack. So that's something that definitely needs to be improved upon. That's what I'm going to be looking for, especially at home. I know Orlando may be struggling this year in the attack, but don't let it be this match here this Saturday where they get it going. A lot of these goals have been defensive miscues and just absolute screaming goals. So let's just play tight nose defense here against Orlando, and we should be able to get the result our way. That's what I want to see from the U.
So what's your score result? Like, prediction? What are you going with?
It's been rough for me these past couple of matches. I have to believe that back at home, like, you have to win at some point, right? Like, it's so unorthodox for this team to have back-to-back home losses in the way they did, right? So I have to believe that they come back. I think it's going to be low scoring. I don't think they're gonna wipe Orlando out of the ballpark here, but I think it's going to be a 2-1 victory. I think it's going to be a late one, maybe like an 89th minute goal here. I think I could see it set
Oh,
up.
I
that
really
type of
hope you're wrong. No, thank you.
Dragging it around, right?
We've been there. Don't need that again.
Well, I just think that's how it's going to set up, simply because of just the way that honestly both these clubs have been playing.
Evan is triggered. Listen, guys, April 6th was the last time the Philadelphia Union won a game. The last 4 games, they've been winless. Of course, they do have 2 ties in that game. They've given up 9 goals in that stretch, and about 9 of those happened in the first 20 to 30 minutes of the game. Now, what makes me nervous is we had this, I'm getting deja vu. We had this same conversation talking about a preview prior to the Seattle game, and it was Seattle that was also struggling and also couldn't score, and also
Conference Orlando City, Seattle Sounders.
Exactly. And so I'm getting a little bit triggered myself, because I remember us having the same conversation not too long ago and hoping, and I even said, okay, well, let's not let the Union be the team that Seattle finally figures it out. And they did. They put up 3 goals pretty quickly, including in the early minutes. So I'm still going to be optimistic that this week is not going to be the week. It's not time for Orlando to figure things out yet. I do feel like a 2-goal deficit is what we might see here. Now, whether that's a 2-0 Union win or a 3-1 Union win, I'm not sure. But the Union have unfortunately been giving up goals. So I think a clean sheet, although that's the goal, and I know Jim Curtin has talked about that, with injuries, with so many changes to their backs, they've had different looks every game. And it's hard to have that, defensive mindset that they've had in the past, but now you have so much change game after game, and you're trying to find consistency and be on the same page. So hopefully this is the game. We get the same backs, the same starting core outside of maybe Julian Carranza, and maybe one other moves. And so I think because of that consistency week to week or game to game, I think the Union might finally figure things out and get back in the win column. It's time. Atlanta, Seattle, DC, RSL, teams that the Union left points on the table or lost points altogether. And against Orlando City, you got to take advantage of the fact that they, as you mentioned, Evan, have so much going on right now that they're trying to figure out. And the Union should be a little bit further along by now in figuring out their mess and their lineup and their rotations and their culture and identity. So I'm going to go 3-1 as my final. I'm talking myself into it. 3-1.
Changing my prediction. Orlando's winning.
A Union win 3-1, because I said this about Seattle, and then Seattle came out and was winning 3-0. So yes.
I'm pivoting off the draw. Orlando's going to win.
Oh,
I don't know how, but they're going to do it. That's all.
Okay.
I'm fired up now.
That's awesome. I love it.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this is like 3-3.
Yo, this could go. Yeah, this could go. It's Philly and Orlando. These games are always weird.
Real.
This could go. I mean, last year, remember the game in Orlando? Orlando looked to put it away. A very questionable foul, Oscar-worthy performance by Jose Martinez. He ends up scoring from 50 yards to tie it up a few minutes later. So we're still a little sore about that one. There was no foul there. Right? The good old trick to VAR, but yeah, we could see something wacky like that for sure.
Evan, all we just need is these two to meet in the playoffs so it can get even wackier.
Could have happened last year. They were both in the crash course. It is funny how similar a spot they're in, isn't it? I mean, they were both in the conference semis last year. They've both been so close in recent seasons and haven't quite gotten over the hump. And now you're kind of in a transition point where is this the crossroads where you got to move on from this core? It's very interesting.
You're spot on.
I like the team building thing you mentioned earlier. The Union eschew the draft. Orlando loves the draft. Kyle Larin, Daryl Dike, Richie Larea, Chris Mueller, Kamal Miller, Duncan McGuire. Tons of great talent has come through the draft. It has worked for both teams, those approaches. So I like when they get together. I know Jim and Oscar have great respect for each other. Should be a really fun game.
Absolutely. Well, you have fun calling that game, Evan. Should be exciting for you.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of PHLY Union Podcast. In the comments, let us know your predictions. Make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe for all of your future viewings of PHLY Union. We'll be back for a Monday afternoon live show. We'll be talking about this match and recapping. And of course, guys, you can catch Evan on the Orlando City radio broadcast if you would like. So until next time, I am JP Zapata, joined, of course, by Evan Weston and Renee Washington. Always, guys, we will see you next time.